Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a challenge that it sits right at the intersection of psychology, sociology, and, well, spiritual practice.
It's a huge one.
It's the ultimate relationship conflict, I think. It goes so much deeper than, arguing about money or in-laws.
Mhm.
We're asking, what happens when one partner is actively trying to dissolve the whole concept of the self, the I,
Right.
while the other is, fundamentally committed to and relying on that stable social identity?
It's a profound, almost cosmic tension. And I think if you're listening to this and you've ever felt that kind of subtle, hard to define mismatch with a partner, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Okay, so we're looking at two totally separate spheres of operation here.
Completely separate. On one side, you've got the spiritual paths, like Zen, which are all about dissolving the ego. The goal is non-self, or anda.
And on the other side?
On the other side is the entire infrastructure of modern relationships, which is built by the social sciences, sociology, psychology, and they're all based on the assumption that you and I are stable, recognizable people who interact.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Our mission here isn't to decide who's right.
No, not at all.
Our mission is to understand why these two worldviews seem so incompatible and, more importantly, to figure out the practical framework for how peace, and maybe even a deep harmony, can still be possible.
Even when partners are operating from completely different realities.
Exactly. We want to give you those concrete aha moments that bring this, philosophical stuff right down into the living room.
I like that.
So let's start with that fundamental divide. For the spiritual partner, the goal is this: ultimate realization. They're trying to look beyond the curtain. What exactly are they trying to dismantle?
They're dismantling the persona.
The persona.
Yeah, think of the persona as the social mask, the carefully constructed ego. It's the story you tell yourself and everyone else about who you are.
So, my job title, my memories, my strengths and weaknesses.
All of it. Your past victories, your perceived flaws. Yeah. In the Zen tradition, realizing anatta means seeing that entire structure, that entire operating system we use for daily life as completely illusory.
So the focus for them is what you'd call ultimate reality.
Exactly. The ultimate reality of the absolute. Everything else is secondary. The aim is the realization of emptiness, shunyata.
Emptiness. That sounds a little bleak.
Well, it's not nihilism. It's not that nothing matters. It's the realization that things lack a permanent, inherent self. They're not solid.
Okay, so what does that focus on the ultimate mean for the relative world? For paying the bills or caring that your partner had a bad day?
Well, if you're really steeped in that realization of emptiness, the whole drama of the ego, it just loses its gravity.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, who said what, whose feelings got hurt, who needs more attention, all of that becomes kind of trivial.
Could you give us an analogy?
Sure. Imagine your partner is intensely stressed about winning a board game, let's say chess. They're learning all the complex rules, trying to predict every move.
Okay.
Now, if you, as the Zen partner, have already realized that the whole physical universe, the game board, the pieces, the house you're in, is an illusion, you just can't take the rules of chess seriously anymore.
Right. The effort they're putting in would seem
Exhausting.
Yeah.
And unnecessary.
That perfectly captures it. It explains why a spiritual partner might feel so disconnected from standard relationship advice. Because all that advice, from counselors to workshops, it only operates in what you're calling the relative reality.
Precisely. The social sciences have to take the game board and the rules seriously. That's their job.
They analyze behaviors, communication styles.
Right, emotional expectations between two stable identities, an I and a you. Their whole method is built on the idea that these stable identities exist, and we need structured ways like active listening to manage how they interact.
So if one person sees that whole structure as fundamentally false,
Then all the complicated advice about navigating ego-to-ego conflict feels like, very detailed instructions for a problem that isn't real, or at least isn't relevant.
okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. If we accept that one partner is dismantling the self, how do they peacefully engage with a partner who is, as some of our sources call it, stuck in their mind, someone fully invested in that persona?
Yeah.
If you're playing chess and I'm watching the universe dissolve, how do we even sit in the same room?
That's the core question. And the first realization is crucial. Peace is never, ever achieved by demanding the mind-stuck partner change or become enlightened.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. That road is just paved with egoic frustration. Instead, peace relies on radical acceptance from the spiritual partner. They have to find their own stability by accepting the partner exactly as they are,
Complete with their attachment to their identity.
complete with all of it. And this is actually where the functional benefit of non-self-awareness really kicks in. When the self breaks down, the boundaries between you and the rest of the world start to dissolve. And that leads to universal compassion.
So you see their suffering as your own.
You literally do. The Zen partner observes the partner's mask, the persona, and sees the suffering that comes from being so attached to that illusion. And because there's no real separation, they feel that suffering as their own suffering.
So if the mind-stuck partner gets upset over something small, like a perceived slight,
The Zen partner doesn't see it as a flaw in the partner,
they see it as.
a universal symptom of attachment. It's not a personal insult. It's just the human condition playing itself out right in front of them.
And that realization is what allows for the practice of non-reaction.
Exactly. Non-reaction is compassion in action. The Zen partner learns to avoid getting dragged into the content of the ego's conflict.
Okay, let's use an example.
Okay, the classic. The partner says, "You didn't take out the garbage because you don't respect me or my schedule."
Right. That whole statement is loaded. It's rooted in the egoic belief that the garbage is a symbol of respect.
The whole thing is content.
But wait, I need to challenge this because this is where a skeptical listener might pause.
Please do. It's a critical point.
If the Zen partner just ignores that emotional content and only focuses on the functional task, doesn't that feel dismissive?
It could.
I mean, if I say I'm hurt and my partner just says the garbage needs to be taken out, that feels like emotional avoidance or even gaslighting.
You are pointing to the most important distinction in this entire deep dive.
So how do we distinguish non-reaction from just being emotionally unavailable?
Non-reaction is not avoidance. It is the refusal to validate the illusion. The Zen partner practices non-reaction to the emotional drama, the "you don't respect me" narrative.
Okay.
But they must practice full presence toward the emotional pain. If the partner is genuinely hurting, the spiritual person absolutely has to respond with warmth and acknowledgement of that pain.
So what would that sound like?
Instead of engaging the content like, "Of course I respect you, you know I'm busy."
Which just validates the false story.
Right, that just fuels the argument. It does. They might instead acknowledge the distress itself.
Right.
"I can hear that you are hurting right now, and I'm sorry I caused that discomfort.
And then?
The garbage absolutely needs to go out, and I will do it now." They translate the conflict back to functional relative reality. They care for the pain, but they refuse to feed the cycle of egoic defense.
That distinction, acknowledging the pain while refusing to validate the ego's story, that's key.
It's everything,
Yeah.
and it requires enormous internal discipline.
Okay, so now let's flip it. We've talked about how the spiritual person finds peace. What about the other partner, the one who is fully invested in their identity? What's their path to peace in this? Let's face it, highly unusual relationship dynamic.
This is where the whole thing becomes this beautiful paradox. Because the relationship often thrives for the mind-stuck partner. It satisfies their deep psychological needs for security, stability, and structure.
And they get that from the person who is dismantling their own structure.
Exactly. But first, a word on mind-stuck. We need to be careful with that term.
Good point.
The social identity, the persona, it isn't a flaw. It's the necessary scaffolding we need to function in relative reality.
You need it to pay taxes, to raise kids.
To navigate incredibly complex social systems, the non-spiritual partner's need for that structure is completely valid and necessary.
Okay, absolutely. So how does the spiritual partner who supposedly cares less about structure provide that stability?
Because the Zen partner is less driven by their own egoic whims, they become an incredibly reliable and present anchor.
I see.
Think about what usually destabilizes relationships.
Shifting status, needing to look good, power struggles.
Validation-seeking, petty dramas, these are all egoic pursuits. A person who is genuinely moving toward non-self, they just aren't interested in that stuff anymore.
So they provide a kind of consistency.
A deep consistency. Their emotional availability is steady because it isn't based on external validation or, their own mood swings. They aren't prone to the kind of status chasing that can destabilize a household, financially or emotionally.
So the paradox is that the person dissolving their identity becomes the most predictable and reliable person in the room.
That's it. It's a powerful insight.
So for the mind-stuck partner, this relationship feels like a source of unconditional acceptance.
It feels like an oasis, a place where they don't have to perform or constantly defend their worth.
The Zen partner doesn't need them to be rich or successful or even emotionally consistent.
They simply see them. without an agenda.
And that lack of judgment must be incredibly peaceful.
It's deeply peaceful. The partner benefits by feeling seen without manipulation. And that stability has practical benefits too. Better scheduling, more level-headed money discussions because no one's buying things to impress people.
And just more emotional bandwidth, I imagine.
Way more, because their mental energy isn't being burned up by internal drama.
But even with all this radical acceptance, people still need to cooperate to live together.
Of course.
The Zen partner can't just ignore the shared practical reality. So this brings us to the necessary bridge. Even if you understand ultimate reality, you still have to use the skills from the social sciences.
Absolutely. Enlightenment doesn't magically download the relative skills you need for cooperation.
So this is where the two worlds have to meet.
This is it. The key area where social sciences become essential, even for the spiritual person, is in communication and establishing boundaries.
So things like active listening and...
Active listening, nonviolent communication. These skills are not about reinforcing the ego. They're about translating absolute awareness into functional relative action that respects the shared life you've built.
Let's focus on boundaries for a second. We usually think of setting a boundary as asserting the self. I need this. I deserve this. How does a Zen partner justify setting a limit without it being an ego trip?
This is the genius of the framework. The boundaries are not set to protect the ego. They're set to protect the practice that maintains the peace.
Okay. That's a huge shift.
It is. If the Zen partner can't maintain their practice, meditation, solitude, silence, then that inner well of non-reaction and compassion dries up. The ego rushes back in, and the whole relationship fails.
So setting a clear limit, like, I need quiet time for meditation from 6 to 7 a.m.
Or, I can't engage in circular, critical arguments that don't go anywhere.
That's not an egoic demand.
It's an honoring of the practice, and that practice serves the entire relationship. It's a necessary operational parameter.
So the spiritual person has to learn to translate their state of non-self into language the other person can actually understand.
Yes, and that's the hard work. They have to focus on utility, on practical consequences, not on spiritual critique.
Right, so they can't say, your attachment to this trivial scheduling issue is blocking the flow of the universe.
That would be a complete failure.
But they could say...
They could say, when we have a debate that lasts more than 20 minutes, my ability to focus on my work the next day is compromised, and that affects our budget.
Grounding the absolute truth in relative functional terms.
That is the whole art. So, to synthesize this whole thing, the harmonious coexistence of these two realities, it relies almost entirely on the Zen partner's spiritual discipline.
Their ability to hold space.
The ability to hold space for the partner's entire identity structure, with all its flaws and drama, without being pulled into it. It is a profound act of spiritual discipline applied directly to a partnership.
And for you, the listener, I think whether you identify more with the Zen path or the, quote, mind-stuck path, understanding this gives you a clear route to non-judgmental stability. If you can learn to accept your partner's reality, whatever it is, as a temporary structure that might be causing them pain, your role changes completely. You stop being their judge or their opponent.
And you become their most reliable anchor.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. If the spiritual person's peace depends entirely on their practice, and boundaries are essential to protect that practice, how does the act of setting a clear, non-negotiable boundary, which seems like a separating, assertive act, how does that become the ultimate, most functional expression of universal compassion?
That's the Kokian right there.
That's the translation that transforms a challenge into a foundation.